All right, good afternoon and welcome to Monday. The Secretary General is in China, where, as you know, he arrived on Saturday. Yesterday, he met with President Xi Jinping in Beijing. The Secretary General congratulated President Xi on his recent re-election and expressed appreciation for the President's support to the work of the United Nations. He said the United Nations continues to count on China's leadership and commitment to the implementation of the 2030 agenda. The Secretary General also said he counted on China's leadership in their support to international cooperation under the Belt and Road Initiative. The Secretary General also commended China's consistent and constructive advocacy for a diplomatic solution to the situation in the Korean Peninsula. He underlined the commitment of the United Nations system to assist in supporting a process of sincere dialogue, including sustainable peace and denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. Yesterday, he also met with Yang Jiechi, the member of the Political Bureau of the Chinese Communist Party's Central Committee, State Councilor and Minister of Foreign Affairs Wang Yi, and Li Keqiang, the Premier of the State Council. Earlier today, the Secretary General visited the China Peacekeeping Police Training Center. In remarks there, he paid tribute to the more than 2,400 Chinese peacekeepers around the world and expressed his gratitude for China's commitment to UN peacekeeping. He said peacekeeping is the most noble mission in today's world, with women and men ready to sacrifice everything to protect the most vulnerable. He then left for Bao in Hainan province to attend the Bao Forum for Asia annual conference. He's scheduled to make a statement during the forum's opening ceremony tomorrow, and we will have that sent to you. Back here, the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, spoke at this morning's opening of the 51st session of the Commission on Population and Development. The theme of this year's session is sustainable cities, human mobility, and international migration. Speaking on behalf of the Secretary General, Ms. Mohammed said that our populations are linked as never before, and cities are at the forefront of receiving, assisting, and integrating migrants and refugees. The migration of people to cities can enhance diversity and integration that can contribute to well-being and innovation, she said, but warned that gaps in understanding are easily filled by myths and misconceptions. She stressed the Commission's work on obtaining better data is vital to inform global discussions on migration. You can watch the sessions this week on the Web TV website and also through the hashtag CPD51 and hashtag UN Population. At 3 p.m. this afternoon, we expect the Security Council to meet on Syria. Stéphane de Mistura, the Special Envoy for Syria, and Thomas Markram, from the Office of Disarmament Affairs, are both expected to brief the Security Council. Mr. de Mistura will do so via video conference. Earlier today, the Director General of the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons expressed his grave concern in response to the alleged chemical weapons attack on April 7th in Douma in Syria. The fact-finding mission from the OPCW is in the process of gathering further information from all available sources to establish whether chemical weapons were used. The mission will report its findings back to the OPCW. And as you will have seen from the statement we issued yesterday, in which the Secretary General expressed his concern about renewed and intensive violence in Douma in eastern Ghouta following a period of relative calm, the Secretary General said he's particularly alarmed by allegations that chemical weapons were used against the civilian population in Douma. While the UN is not in a position to verify these reports, the Secretary General notes that any use of chemical weapons, if confirmed, is abhorrent and requires a thorough investigation. Turning to Gaza, we remain deeply concerned about the situation in Gaza, particularly the reports of fatalities and injuring of civilians during last Friday's demonstrations, and we condemn any action leading to the loss of civilian lives. We reiterate our call on all sides to refrain from any acts that could lead to further casualties, and in particular, any measures that could place civilians in harm's way. The Special Coordinator, Nikolai Mladenov, remains in contact with pertinent interlocutors to have a full picture of events, including reported Palestinian attempts to bridge the fence and alleged IED attempts throughout the weekend. and Mr. Mladenov was in Gaza today. As the Secretary General has pointed out, the current situation underlines the urgency of revitalizing the peace process, aiming at creating the conditions for a return to meaningful negotiations for a peaceful solution. Meanwhile, the humanitarian coordinator for the occupied Palestinian territory, Jamie McGoldrick, warned on Friday that Gaza's health sector is struggling to deal with the mass influx of casualties. An estimated $2 million is urgently needed in the short term for medicine, medical disposable lab materials, and other supplies. And yesterday in the Central African Republic, government forces from the Central African Republic, as well as from the UN peacekeeping mission in the country, launched a joint disarmament and arrest operations targeting the bases of criminal groups in the PK5 neighborhood in Bangui. The operation resulted in the arrests and the seizures of arms, ammunitions, and drugs. This joint operation will continue until criminal groups of PK5 are dismantled. The residents of PK5 have repeatedly called on the UN mission to intervene and put an end to the activities of the neighborhood's criminal gangs. These gangs are responsible for extensive abuses against the local population, including the extortion of merchants and attacking civilians, while blocking the return of state authorities to the area. Prior to the operation, these criminal groups were provided the opportunity to voluntarily disarm, which would have enabled some of their members to benefit from socioeconomic programs along with the wider community. Unfortunately, the leaders of the groups refused this option, despite a mediation offered by local community leaders. And today, the Undersecretary General for Peacekeeping Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, and African Union Commissioner for Peace and Security, Ismail Shergi, are in Darfur in Sudan. Upon arrival in Khartoum yesterday, they held discussion on the overall situation in Darfur and the implementation of the joint UN-AU mission's mandate, including its ongoing reconfiguration. They also held meetings with government officials, including the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ibrahim Khandour. Tomorrow, after a visit to Zamzam camp for displaced persons, Mr. Lacroix and Mr. Shergi will travel to the Central African Republic. They will also co-chair the first meeting of the International Support Group on the Central African Republic, aimed at encouraging the international community to re-engage in the peace process and to support the urgent humanitarian needs of millions in the country. The joint visit is aimed at further strengthening the important partnership between the UN and the African Union. More details in a note to correspondence, which was issued over the weekend. And back here, the Executive Director of the UN Office for Drugs and Crime, Yury Fedotov, spoke at an event on crime prevention and sustainable development through sports. He stressed the importance of sport as a means of engaging with youth and a path to preventive violence and crime. Fair play, tolerance, and team spirit are just a few of the common principles of sport with the Sustainable Development Agenda, he said, and added the UN is committed to working with young people around the world to build resilience, promote opportunities for them, and harness positive change that can you can watch this morning's proceedings on the UN Web TV portal. And lastly, we thank our friends in Bridgetown in Barbados who have paid their regular budget dues in full, which brings us up to the beautiful number of 75. Khalas. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, sir. Deepak Arora with the Tribune Online. Secretary General's visit to China, and he has offered his assistance for successful dialogue for the Korean Peninsula. And I'm asking this question.
For successful what?
Dialogue for peace in Korean Peninsula.
Yes.
Now, I'm asking this question in the light, of course, the two presidents are having meeting at the special zone between North and South Korea. Now, the world is looking forward to a meeting between President Kim and President Trump. Now, did Secretary General offer, or was there any reaction from Chinese about the place hosting it, either at Geneva or UN headquarters in New York?
I'm not aware of any specific offer that we've made to host any discussions. Obviously, we welcome the ongoing dialogue, not only between the between the DPRK and the Republic of Korea, but also the expected meeting between the President of the United States and the leader of the DPRK. Mr. Abadi.
Thank you, Stéphane. Regarding that meeting between the Secretary General and President Xi Jinping, the Chinese president said that global governance needs to be improved. And in answer, the Secretary General said multilateral institutions need to be strengthened. What does he mean precisely, the Secretary General? That
I think we can always, the organs of the United Nations, the institutions of the United Nations can be strengthened, one, by ensuring that all its member states recommit themselves to working through multilateral institutions. And I think there's always a need, and as you know, the Secretary General is pushing on his end for reform to make these institutions more effective.
Understand the desire of China to play a larger role in the Bretton Woods institutions, namely the IMF and the World Bank.
I think it's not for the Secretary General to speak for the Chinese government. Mr. Klein.
Yes, regarding the planned investigation of the alleged chemical attack in Syria, could you provide any more details on timetable and kind of the modalities of this investigation? Are there going to be ongoing talks with the Syrian government, perhaps through the UN's own facilities?
Just to be clear,
for access.
To be clear, what we have is an existing mechanism which is led by the OPCW, not by the Secretariat. So it's led out of The Hague by the Organization for the Prohibition of the Use of Chemical Weapons. And that's a fact-finding mechanism which has been in place for some time, which is there to establish the facts as to whether or not chemical weapons was used. That's in the hands of the OPCW. There was, up until a short while ago, another mechanism, which was the Joint Investigative Mechanism, which was there to further investigate and assign responsibility. The mandate of the Joint Investigative Mechanisms was not renewed, so we are left right now in terms of international institutions with the fact-finding mission.
But in the past, isn't it true that the UN has tried to facilitate on-site access and kind of the modalities for the investigators to go in?
I mean, I think right now it's in the hands of the OPCW. Obviously, if the UN in Syria can be helpful in any way, we will do so. Masoud and Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Stéphane. On this conflicting, demands for a Security Council meeting, one was by the Russians and one was by the Western group led by UK and US and other countries. Now, can you tell us about this attack that the Russians claim on by the Israelis in Israel on one of the Syrian base? Is that going to be part of the whole Security Council meeting?
I think, first of all, from our point of view, we have no independent information as to on the attack on the Syrian base, just to make that clear. Second, I think that's a question for the Council presidency. I mean, like you, we read in the press the conflicting requests for meetings. What we have been told by our colleagues in Security Council Affairs is that there will be a meeting at 3 p.m. on the situation in Syria. We will be providing a briefing on our end, which will focus obviously on the need for the continuing need to protect civilians, underscoring the fact that regardless of who is to blame for the violence, the civilians are continuing to pay a price, underscoring the fact that, again, that we need, as if we needed to say it again, but we will say it again, that there is no other solution but a political solution to this current crisis. Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Stéphane. On Friday, a young Palestinian journalist, his name is Yasser Murtaja. He's 30 years old. He has a vest clearly marked press, yet he was shot and killed. And I'm waiting to hear any statement, which normally especially UNESCO, issue a statement condemning targeting journalists. Is there any position on that?
As a matter of principle, we, of course, stand against the targeting of journalists. We've condemned those targeted attacks against journalists over and over again, as have our colleagues at UNESCO. And we've condemned any action that has led to the loss of civilian life. Okay, I was trying to escape, but I guess, Mr. Klein, you may go at it again.
Yeah, I want to go back to the alleged chemical attack in Syria. Have there been any reports from any UN personnel on the ground that would confirm or lead to believe that there was such an attack and involved chlorine gas? Or is the UN itself just as much in the dark as the rest of us and relying on?
We're not in a position at this point to independently verify the allegations, but obviously any allegation of continued use of chemical weapons is extremely, extremely troubling.
So,
yes, sir.
Yeah. So, in other words, you're not able to verify also the Israeli attack of.
I think I just said that. We have no way of verifying at this point. We are not on site at these military bases, and obviously we have no way of verifying who may be responsible for these attacks. Go ahead, Mr. Abadi.
Thank you, Stéphane. At the Beijing meeting, has the Secretary General raised the question of South China Sea dispute?
I'm not aware if that specific issue came up, but we can check. Mr. Brendan Varmer, it is your turn.